Okay.
We are now live.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sabitsu. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our online Dhamma group. Before we start, we will take together the 5 precepts. We always take the 5 precepts together before each class because it's something wholesome and we want to keep reminding ourselves of. And I will show them shortly on screen. Everyone can read along. Those in the community can keep themselves on their microphone muted, but everyone is welcome to take the 5 precepts with us, and one of us will lead them. And there's also a translation where you can see what everything means when we say it in the Pali language. From our Discord community, is there anyone who'd like to lead the precepts for us today?
Do it.
Thank you, Edith. You may start.
Aham Bante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami Dutiyampi Aham Bante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami Tatiyampi Aham Bante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tisaranagammanang nititang.
Bhante.
Parnatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamesu micchacara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamisu michachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiya.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sura Meraya Majjapamadatthana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
Suramiraya majja pamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Imani Pancha Sikkhapadani Silena Sugating Yanti Silena Bhoga Sampada Silena Nibbutting Yanti Tasma Silang Visodhaye.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Edith. So, today we will start reading the book by Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw. Last time we read the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, and today we will read the book where Mahasi Sayadaw talks about it. We will each read 2 paragraphs, and we start by alphabetical order in the Discord community. And please, everyone, read slowly and carefully, and between each paragraphs, take a short break. So maybe there will be an explanation or questions, and we have time for that. And since I don't remember who was reading last time, I will just start today. Chapter 1. The Great Discourse on the Wheel of Dhamma. First part. Delivered on the new moon day of To Tallinn, 1324 Myanmar era. Reverence to that Blessed One, the Exalted One, the Supremely Enlightened. Preface to the Discourse. Today is the new moon day of To Tallinn. Beginning from today, we will expound the first sermon of the Blessed One, namely the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, commonly known as the Great Discourse on the Wheel of Dhamma.
So yeah, this is a book form of a series of talks given by the Mahasi Sayadaw. I'm not sure how much of a series it was or whether it was pulled from various sources. But it was a long time ago, well before the existence of computers, let alone the internet. So it would have been typewritten, most likely. And I don't even know if they had typewriters. I don't know what they had back then, but they had something. And so there's going to be some errors in the text. We've already found one that's pretty significant. We'll have to point it out. So bear with us with that. I think it's incredibly valuable nonetheless. I mean, obviously.
Being the first sermon ever delivered by the Blessed One, it is the most ancient and the most straightforward of his
Dilawar,
teaching. Yeah?
I think there's an audio issue. Can you look into that? Seems to work now.
Okay. You mean on Discord or on YouTube?
Earlier when Venerable Dhamma was giving his insight, the audio was not picking up on the YouTube. But now it looks like it's back online once we start the reading.
Okay.
Did they hear none of that I said?
I don't think they did, Bante, only the ones in the Discord community.
All right, well, in brief, then, this book was composed of various talks that the Mahasi Sayadaw gave. I think he had a lot to do with turning it into a book form as well, but this was well before the era of computers, let alone the internet. And so there's going to be some typographical errors. There's one fairly significant error coming up that we'll have to point out. But just bear with us and appreciate that this is a gift of the Dhamma, and focus on the content rather than the polished state of the text. It's given away for free. These booklets were given away for free by the Mahasi Sayadaw, by his students, by the organization that spreads his teaching.
Thank you, Bante. I think that one worked. I don't know what happened. Okay, I will continue with the reading. Being the first sermon ever delivered by the Blessed One, it is the most ancient and the most straightforward of his teachings. Rare is the person amongst the laity of this Buddhist country of the Union of Myanmar who has not heard of this discourse. Numerous are those who have committed the sutta to memory. There are, in almost every town and village, religious groups under the name of the Wheel of Dhamma Reciting Society, devoted to group recitation of the sutta and listening to it. The Buddhist followers regard the sutta with great esteem and veneration, as it was the first dispensation of the Blessed One.
Yeah, if you're going to memorize a sutta, this is a good one to choose. There are others that are more commonly memorized. This isn't the most commonly memorized sutta in the Buddhist world. The Karaniya Metta Sutta, the Mahamangala Sutta, and the Ratana Sutta are the three suttas that are probably most commonly memorized. Though I would say the Karaniya Metta Sutta is the most common, most likely. I'm not so clear on Myanmar. I've never been there and haven't had that much exposure to Burmese monks, but certainly is a common one. And the thing is that the ones that are more common are not as focused on the deepest teachings of the Buddha. So this one is great because it's not that long, and it's very much an exposition of the very core teachings. So the Buddha made sure that in his first discourse, he really taught what was most important. He knew what he was doing. This was his intention, to turn the wheel of Dhamma. So it couldn't be some superficial teaching like the teaching of metta, which is a good teaching, but it's not the Buddhist teaching. If he came out and said, what I teach is metta, wouldn't have had the same impact, and it wouldn't have been the turning of the wheel of the Dhamma. The turning of the wheel of the Dhamma was, of course, as we learned last week, the exposition on the Four Noble Truths, with its 12 factors.
There are now in existence numerous Nisaya, or other forms of translation, explaining and interpreting the Pali of the Sutta in Burmese, but there is scarcely any work which explicitly shows what practical methods are available from the Sutta and how they could be utilized by the ardent, sincere meditators who aspire to gain the path and its fruition. We ourselves have expounded this sutta on numerous occasions, emphasizing on its practical application to meditation. We formally opened this Yangon Meditation Center with a discourse of this sutta and have repeatedly delivered the sermon in this place. Elsewhere, to wherever a meditation center was newly opened, we always employed this sutta as an inaugural discourse.
The Buddhist canon has three main divisions. Three baskets or Tipitaka in Pali. One, the Sutta Pitaka, the sermon basket. Two, the Vinaya Pitaka, or the discipline basket. Three, the Abidhamma Pitaka, or the analytical and philosophical basket. The discourse on the wheel of Dhamma is included in the Sutta Pitaka, which is made up of the 5 Nikayas, namely the Digha Nikaya, the Majjhima Nikaya, the Samyutta Nikaya, the Anguttara Nikaya, and the Khuddaka Nikaya.
So for those of you who are not deeply learned in the Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, there are 3 parts to the Buddha's teaching, and so the founders, the collectors of the Buddha's teaching, collected them into 3 baskets, meaning they put the texts into 3 piles or 3. I guess at that time they used baskets to keep them, baskets of some sort, containers of some sort to keep these manuscripts in. Or maybe it was even before the textual period, the written period, so maybe it was just metaphorical baskets, like they were in different collections. And the idea is that there are 3 parts to the Buddha, 3 trainings in the Buddhist teaching: the sila, the training on ethics or morality; samadhi, the teaching on focus, concentration, meditation; and panya, the training in wisdom and understanding and direct experience of reality. So based on the framework of these 3 trainings, they laid down the format of the Tipitaka. That would be in the first part would be all of the. It actually, I think. In Myanmar, they put the Sutta Pitaka first. I was curious as to why he puts them in that order, because in Thailand, they certainly don't put them in that order. But I think it might be that in Myanmar, they put the Digha Nikaya as the very beginning. Anyway, regardless, there's the Sutta Nikaya is focused on meditation. The Vinaya Pitaka is focused on ethics, very deep, not exactly ethics, but like rules. A lot of rules, procedures, guidelines, duties, that sort of thing. The sort of the basis of your practice that leads to samadhi, or that is used to allow for samadhi to grow, for meditation practice to flourish. Without, for example, the 5 precepts, you couldn't even begin to practice mindfulness. And so for monastics, there's a lot more rules, and those are rules, duties, that sort of thing, and those are contained in the Vinaya Pitaka. The Abidhamma Pitaka is meant to be a description of wisdom, what you will experience as a result of your practice. So as a result of practicing meditation, mindfulness, as a result of cleansing, purifying your perception of reality, seeing things more clearly, Abidhamma is meant to be an expression of what you will see to some extent. I mean, some of it is so detailed and refined that only a Buddha could see it. But for the most part, it's very much the kinds of things you will see. So it's not, the Abhidhamma is not something that you should really try to understand. It's something you can listen to and read, to appreciate and to get an idea of what it is that you will experience through practice. But I was just talking, someone posted a question about the Abhidhamma and using it to analyze their practice, and I said that's really not how you should use the Abhidhamma. Of course, you shouldn't be analyzing your practice. You should be mindful of the desire to analyze and so on. So that's what I said to them. But yeah, the Abhidhamma Pitaka, the 3rd Pitaka, is meant to be an expression of wisdom, Buddha's wisdom. I think people make the mistake thinking that you could jump. So they don't want to keep ethics and they focus on the Sutta Pitaka, or they don't want to practice meditation, so they focus on the Abhidhamma Pitaka to try to just skip right to wisdom. That's not really how it works. You don't have to read the Vinaya Pitaka, that's for monks, for the most part. There are some stories, and they're really good stories, and there is some wisdom that you can gain about the very specific and detailed monastic practices. It can be edifying, but not something you have to focus on. So really focusing on the Sutta Pitaka is probably the best for lay people, and of course for anyone monastic as well who is interested in the practice. The Abhidhamma is something you can and should listen to and resonate with, try to appreciate. But our focus really is on the Sutta Pitaka because it's the practice part. Assuming that we already have basic ethics, at least the 5 precepts, hopefully focusing on the 8 precepts during intensive meditation practice. But yes, this sutta, as a sutta, it falls in the Sutta Pitaka, which is full of many and various teachings of the Buddha on how to practice meditation and how to cultivate the practices that will allow us to give rise to wisdom and understanding. That's where this sutta fits. So he does a great thing, which is often missed by those who study the Buddhist teaching, the monastic, those who teach it. And he's kind of subtly, it's a subtle criticism that is fairly familiar for this kind of teacher, is that those who normally teach it focus more on the theory, the academic side of things. And this is what's great about Mahasi Sayadaw. Why focusing on his books I think is a really good idea, why I think it's going to be fruitful and valuable for us, is because very much about put it into practice. Apply these teachings. Try to see them for yourself. He's very, very clearly in that camp and focused on that aspect of the teaching.
The Samyutta Nikaya is divided into 5 groups known as Vagas: Sagata Vaga, Nidana Vaga, Khanda Vaga, Salayatana Vaga, and Mahavaga. The Mahavaga is divided again into 12 subgroups such as Magga Samyutta, Bojanga Samyutta, Satipatthana Samyutta, etc. The last of which being Satya Samyutta.
So the Samyutta Nikaya isn't really all that related to our sutta, but it just happens to be in the Samyutta Nikaya, which is a section of the Sutta Pitaka that groups texts by topic. So what he's saying here is that they're grouped in the Vagas are the various. Well, actually, the Vagas are more general categorizations, but within each of the Vagas, within each of the chapters, which are sort of loosely organized, like this, the first one, Sagata Vaga, is those that have verses. Sagata means with verses. So those suttas that have verses, those that are focused on verses are in that Vaga, and so on. The Mahavaga is sort of the everything else. Maha means great, so it just means the big chapter, which has a lot of different stuff in it. But that's not the important part. Is in the actual Samyuttas. So each Samyutta means collection, and these are on a topic. So the Magga Samyutta is any sutta that focuses mostly on the path, is in that one. Any that focus on the Bojanga, the factors of enlightenment, is in that Samyutta. The Satipatthana Sutta has sutta after sutta that are very similar to the Satipatthana Sutta. So for those of you who are interested in the practice of Satipatthana, which everyone here should be, it can be quite valuable to go through that Samyutta and see all the different ways, because there's some of them are very similar, and some of them are very similar to the Satipatthana Sutta, but they give insight into the different ways that the Buddha taught. So if you get hung up, you don't want to get hung up on the Satipatthana Sutta. It's only one way that the Buddha taught this teaching, and there are other subtle differences that he taught to different audiences. But yeah, within that one is anything about Satipatthana, and there's many others. And the last one is the Satya Samyutta. Satya means truth. So because the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta focuses on the Four Noble Truths, it's in the Satya Samyutta, the collection related to the Four Noble Truths.
The Wheel of Dhamma appears as the first discourse in the second Vaga of the subgroups Satya Samyutta, and it was recited as such in the proceedings of the 6th Great Council. In the 6th Great Council edition of the Tripitaka, it is recorded on pages 368 to 371 of the 3rd volume of the Samyutta Pitaka. There the introduction to the discourse reads, Evam me sutam ekam samayam, thus have I heard at one time.
These were the introductory words uttered by the Venerable Ananda when interrogated by the Venerable Mahakassapa at the first council, held just over 3 months after the passing away of the Blessed One. The Venerable Mahakassapa said to the Venerable Ananda,
So yes, 3 months after the Buddha passed away, there was the first Buddhist council. What happened, if you read in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, right after the Buddha passed away, some monks were already excited about the fact that the Buddha had passed away, saying, well, now we don't have to follow the Buddha's teaching. Now we can just practice however we want. The Buddha laid down all these rules, and that was onerous. And now we're free to do as we like. And so Mahakassapa heard this and thought to himself, oh dear, something needs to be done. And so called together all the enlightened arahants, and they met in the Saptaparni. It's called the Saptaparni. These 7 caves up on Rajagaha. You can still go up there. It's really actually difficult to get to, but you can still see these 7 caves, or what's left of them, if you go up there. They stayed in these caves, and they recited all of the Buddhist teaching, and Mahakassapa was the questioner. So at that time, Mahakassapa would ask questions, and Ananda would answer them. And he would ask, who was this? First he asked Upali, or I don't know what the order was, but he asked Upali about the Vinaya, and he asked Ananda about the sutta. So for the sutta, he would ask Ananda about these suttas, and Ananda would say, thus have I heard at one time, and the at one time is then part of the next passage. At one time the Blessed One was staying so in such and such a place. Right, so here he's going to say that in the next paragraph. He's going to say what Mahakassapa said to what he asked, because he was the questioner.
Friend Ananda, where was the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta delivered? By whom was it delivered, and on whose account? And how was it delivered? The Venerable Ananda answered, My Lord Venerable Mahakassapa, thus have I heard. At one time, the Blessed One was staying at the sage's resort, the pleasance of Isipatana, where Pachika Buddhas and enlightened ones alighted from the sky. In the deer sanctuary, in the township of Benares. Then the Blessed One addressed the group of 5 bhikkhus. These 2 extremes bhikkhus should be followed by one who has gone forth from the worldly life.
So yeah, as was pointed out, it should say should not be followed. That's a typo. They're missing a word there. Should absolutely not be followed. That is absolutely not what the Buddha said. He in fact said the exact opposite. These 2 extremes should not be followed by one who has gone forth from the worldly life. Dve me bhikkhave anta pabajitena na. Na means not. Not sevitaba. Not. It doesn't literally mean followed. It means engaged in, pursued, I guess, is the idea. But it's not, engaged in it all to any extent.
The date of the discourse. This introduction lacks a definite date of delivery of the discourse. As in all other suttas, the date was mentioned merely as once or at one time. A precise chronological data as to the year, the month, and the date on which each discourse was delivered would have been very helpful. But chronological details would appear to be an encumbrance to committing the suttas to memory and to their recitation. Thus, it is not easy to place a precise date for each the suttas.
Yeah, they weren't so
be
concerned
possible?
with, they weren't so much focused on when something was, the details like that. In fact, they appear to have eschewed any sort of organized structure. Their organization is very, very utilitarian, which kind of has its own charm. The fact that, like the Samyutta Nikaya, they just threw all the suttas about Satipatthana together in one place. It's valuable. I mean, more valuable than knowing when a sutta. I mean, he says it would have been very helpful. I'm not quite sure what it would have been very helpful for. I guess helpful to some extent, but obviously that wasn't their primary concern. And obviously for memorizing, for keeping the texts memorized would have been challenging. There's something to that statement as well about how these suttas were streamlined in their memorization. They were put in a form that was easily memorized. So they all start with the same words and have the same sort of structure. There's very little chaff.
It should, however, be possible to work out the exact date on which Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta was delivered, because it was the first sermon of the Blessed One, and also because reference could be made to internal evidences provided in other suttas and Vinaya Pitikas. The Buddha attained supreme enlightenment on the night of the full moon of Kazan in the year 103 of the Great Era. Then he preached this Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta in the early evening on the full moon day of the following Waso. It is exactly 2,506 years now, in this year, 1324, of the Burmese era, since the Buddha's final parinibbana had taken place. Adding on the 45 years of dispensation before parinibbana, it would total up to 2,551 years. Thus, it was on the first watch of the full moon of Waso, 2,551 years ago, that this first sermon was delivered by the Blessed One. The Western scholars regard this estimation as 60 years too early. According to their calculation, it was only 2,491 years ago that the first sermon was preached. As the event of the turning of the wheel took place in the East, we would rather go by the Oriental calculation and regard the first sermon as being taught 2,551 years ago.
So this is common in Buddhist societies to count the years from the Buddha's parinibbana. This is the Thai calendar, because Thai was not taken over by the British like Myanmar was. Thailand has its own calendar and it's based on the Buddha's parinibbana. So I think Thailand's up to 2,568 or 69. I'm not keeping so good track of that. But that means that this book was written about 60 years ago, or over 60 years ago. And I think Thai and Burmese reckoning of the Buddha's parinibbana is also not exact. It's off by a year or two.
The deer park, in which the deers were given sanctuary, must have been a forest area with deers roaming about harmlessly. At present, however, the area has been depleted of forest trees and has become an open plain with cultivated patches surrounding human habitations. In ancient times, Pacheco Buddhas traveled in space by supernatural powers from the Gandhamadana mountain and descend to earth at this isolated place. Likewise, the enlightened ones of the dim past came here by magical flights and alighted on this same spot to preach the first sermon. Hence the name Hermitage or the sage's resort. The introduction to the sutta says the Blessed One preached the first sermon to the group of 5 bhikkhus while he was staying in the pleasance of the deer sanctuary in the township of Benares. That is all the information that could be obtained from the introductory statement, which is bare and inadequate. It needs some elaboration, and we propose to provide one by drawing materials from other suttas also.
For those interested, Isipatana is now much more forested, I think. It's become a Buddhist holy place. Quite well, actually. Still run by the Hindus. I'm not 100% about that, but still run by the Indian government, I think. And the actual Chaitya, the big stone landmark, is enclosed by a fence, and the ancient monastery ruins are enclosed in a big fenced-off area that you have to pay to get into. It's a tourist site, but around it, there's still a forest, and they've brought deer back. They've introduced deer into the forest that you can feed fruit to. Monasteries of various kinds. There's a very big and impressive Thai monastery, and the monk, the head monk of that monastery, we met him. He's passed away now, but I met him before he passed away the first time I went to India, and the second time I went back he'd already passed, I think. But when I was there, he was still building this huge standing Buddha. And he was telling us all about how the work that went into that. But he also explained to us that he was in Bangkok. He isn't Thai. He wasn't Thai. He was Indian. But he went to Wat Mahathat for whatever, to teach, to study. I'm not sure. But he was part of this group that was in Wat Mahathat when there was a huge kerfuffle, and fueled by jealousy, and it's a huge story in the history of Thai Buddhism, that monks who were jealous of all the activity in and around Wat Mahathat, with all the practice of the Mahasi Sayadaw's teaching, the study of the Abidhamma, the opening of a Buddhist university. Wat Mahathat became a real center for Buddhist study and practice in Thailand. It's where my teacher went to learn Vipassana when he was still a young monk. And this monk, so the story, this monk was there when the head monk of the monastery was accused of terrible things, including terrible things. Let's just put it at that. Leave it at that. And put in jail. Originally told to disrobe and then put in jail, and it was all a sham, just because he was very popular and very powerful. In fact, it's a huge story. I won't go into it. But this monk was told he had 24 hours to leave the country, and so he went back to Sarnath, Isipatana, and started a monastery there. I don't remember the exact history, but he was building this huge standing Buddha, just huge, made out of stone. So he had these stones that were like, well, it must have been huge stones that they had brought down the river or up the river or whatever, and were carving on location. He had people there carving and placing them, putting them together to make this huge standing stone Buddha, which is there now. It's now standing impressively tall. I think we have a picture of it with us standing at its foot. Anyway, so Sarnath has become much more of a great Buddhist place. It's a great place to visit. It's a little bit touristy, obviously. I mean, there's a lot of people trying to sell you souvenirs, but they are good souvenirs for the most part. And it's definitely one of the most important places to visit. It's not one of the 4 places, right? Where the Buddha, oh yeah, no, it is, sorry. Where the Buddha was born, where he became enlightened, where he first taught, and where he attained Parinibbana. So it is one of the 4 main places to visit as a Buddhist. Definitely worth going to see. The Buddha said that every Buddhist should go to these 4 places once in their life. Well, I don't know if he put it like that. He said if someone goes there with faith, it will be to their great benefit, I think is how he put it. In the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, he talked about these 4 places.
Three kinds of introductions. The introduction to a sutta explains on whose or what account the sutta was taught by the Buddha. Introductions are of 3 kinds. A. The introduction which gives the background story of the remote distant past. This provides an account of how Bodhisattva, the future Buddha, fulfilled the perfections required of an aspirant Buddha, beginning from the time of prophecy proclaimed by Dipankara Buddha to the time when he was reborn in the Tusita heaven as a king of the Devas named Setaketu. There is no need nor time to deal more with this background story of the distant past. B. The introduction touching on the background story of the intermediate period. This deals with the account of what passed from the time of existence in the Tusita heaven to the attainment of full enlightenment on the throne of wisdom. We shall give attention to this introduction to a considerable extent.
C. The introduction which tells of the recent past just preceding the teaching of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. This is what is learned from the statement, "Thus have I heard," at one time, quoted above. We shall deal now with relevant extracts from the second category of introductions, drawing our materials from Sukumala Sutta of Tika Nipata, Anguttara Nikaya, Pasarasi, or Arya Pariyesana Sutta, and Mahasacakka Sutta of Mulapanasa, Bodhiraja Kumara Sutta, and Sangarava Sutta of Majjhipanasa, Pabbajja Sutta, Padana Sutta of Sutta Nipata, and many others suttas.
Bodhisatta and worldly pleasures. After the Bodhisatta had passed away from the heaven of Tusita, he entered the womb of Mahamaya Devi, the principal queen of King Suddhodana of Kapilavatthu. The Bodhisatta was born on Friday, the full moon of Keson, in the year 68 of the Great Era, in the pleasure grove of sal trees called Lumbini Grove, and was named Siddhartha. At the age of 16, he was married to Yasodhaya Devi, daughter of Supabuddha, the royal master of Devadaha. Thereafter, surrounded by 40,000 attendant princesses, he lived in enjoyment of kingly pleasures in great magnificence. While he was thus wholly given over to sensuous pleasure amidst pomp and splendor, he came out one day accompanied by attendants to the royal pleasure grove for a garden feast and merrymaking. On the way to the grove, the sight of the decrepit, aged person gave him a shock, and he turned back to his palace. As he went out on the second occasion, he saw a person who was sick with disease and returned greatly alarmed. When he sallied forth for the third time, he was agitated in heart on seeing a dead man and hurriedly retraced his steps. The alarms and agitations that set upon the Bodhisatta were described in the Arya Pariyesana Sutta.
The Ignoble Quest. The Bodhisatta pondered thus: when oneself is subjected to old age, to seek and crave for what is subjected to old age is not befitting. And what are subjected to old age? Wife and children, slaves, goats and sheep, fowls and pigs, elephants, horses, cattle, gold and silver, all objects of pleasures and luxuries, animate and inanimate, are subjected to old age. Being oneself subjected to old age, to crave for these objects of pleasures, to be enveloped and immersed in them is not proper. Similarly, it does not befit one, when oneself is subjected to disease and death, to crave for sensual objects which are subjected to disease and death, to go after what is subjected to old age, disease, and death, what is not befitting and proper, constitutes an ignoble quest, anariya pariye sana.
The Noble Quest. Being oneself subjected to old age, disease, and death, to go in search of that which is not subjected to old age, disease, and death, constitutes a noble quest. Arya Pariyesana. That Bodhisatta himself was engaged at first in ignoble quests, which was described in the sutta as follows.
Zach, you can read another paragraph.
Now, bhikkhus, before my enlightenment, I was only an unenlightened bodhisatta. Being myself subject to birth, I sought after what was also subject to birth. Being myself subject to old age, I sought after what was also subject to old age.
Okay, we've hit the hour, so that's where we will stop our reading today. Thank you everyone for reading. Thank you Bhante for explaining. And now is the time for questions. If you have any questions about the text, you can write them down. If you have questions about Buddhism, you can write them down, or about your practice. Anything related to...
Yeah.
Sorry?
No, I just wanted to say that just a comment on the format of the Dhamma group is it's, as you can tell by now, it's going pretty slowly. If you're here to do a deep dive into the specific sutta, that's not what we're here for. We're taking a much more relaxed and hopefully practice-based look at the Buddha's teaching. So we're trying to leave room for tangents, going off on tangents, and people asking questions, and just really trying to appreciate the Buddha's teaching. And as a result, we go quite slowly, and having to explain things to people who might not understand what is being talked about is going to add to that. So expect it to be on this sort of pace the whole way through. If you find the teaching or the text being read or that being talked about to be dull or uninteresting, or if you find your mind unable to stay focused on the teachings at times, or maybe you're just not interested in a certain topic, or maybe it's something you already know. If I go off on a tangent trying to explain some of the details about what's being said, then it's perfectly fine to switch to solely practicing mindfulness during the discussion. I mean, absolutely, if you're just listening and appreciating that we're here to study the Dhamma without having to focus too much on the Dhamma itself, the topic of Dhamma being discussed itself, then you can really just focus on the Dhamma directly and take part in the study group in the most important way, and that's by being mindful. So you should, of course, always keep that in mind, regardless, that this should be an opportunity for us to be mindful together at all times. But yeah, so now the next hour, we have up to an hour if people have questions. If there are no questions, we can just be mindful for a while, potentially leaving early, but that hasn't ever really happened. Usually there's enough questions to see us through. But until there are questions, we can also just sit quietly together.
I'm getting the black screens again when I leave, when I go to the sheet, so it might be a bit difficult now to see you, Bhante. I'll try something else. Okay, I have a question from the YouTube chat. If possible, could you please share about the concept of the elephant's footprint and the first sermon?
So this isn't an actual question. This is a request to give a talk. I think I don't think those are the sorts of questions we're going to entertain. Just I haven't prepared a talk. I haven't prepared anything to say about those things. So this is more if you have a specific question. So if you have a question about those things, you're welcome to ask it. A question about some topic of the Buddhist. I mean, ideally, we're looking for questions. Our top tier questions, the ones we prioritize, are those about your practice. Those where you have a need for an answer. They're not just curiosity or intellectual interest or the desire to hear me talk. They should be something that you need an answer to. Ideally, something that is you actually need an answer. So it would be helpful to your practice to get an answer to that question. I mean, it's not wrong to ask people to give talks. It's just I don't think that's the format here.
And I have to apologize for the technical difficulties on my end to the YouTube audience and you, Bante, because there's occasionally a black screen where your camera should be. It's not ideal. But there are not a lot
There's no fault there.
Okay.
Well, if there are no questions, you certainly can sit quietly. We can also just leave early. So let's give it a little bit, and if there are no questions, we'll just finish there.
But also remember that to our members of the Discord community, you are also welcome to ask questions. It's not just for YouTube. So if there are any questions among the Discord group, you can go ahead and ask. So there's another question, this time in the YouTube, in the Discord group, and it asks, as I understand, did the Buddha ever talk about, the Buddha never talked about breath in the stomach, right?
Wrong. The Buddha did talk about breath in the stomach. He specifically mentioned it. But it's not, I mean, it's not really important. He also never talked specifically about, or he didn't specifically talk about feeling the breath at the nose either. Or not either. He specifically mentioned the stomach and not the nose. But that's not the point. The point is it's the breath, you know. When breathing happens, there are experiences. And so you're either focusing on breath as a concept, which leads to tranquility, or you're focusing on those experiences. There's experiences at the nose, there's experiences at the stomach. These sorts of experiences are impermanent, suffering, and non-self, and so paying attention to them allows you to see the three characteristics. The fact that the Buddha did or didn't mention a specific experience is really irrelevant. I mean, it's not conclusive in any way. He talked about the breath, and that's with good reason. And for those reasons, we also still teach generally to focus as using experiences that are based on the breath as our primary object. Of course, there's nothing special about it. It's just primary because it's the best reason is because it's always there. It's always there, and it's neutral. It's not something you're likely to have an opinion of, positive or negative. So it's a really good way to start being objective, just like walking. The foot is not something you're likely to have a very strong opinion of either. So they make good objects. They're always there. They're things you can easily focus on. And they're real, so they allow for the cultivation of insight, cultivation of wisdom, cultivation of clarity and mindfulness, put it that way. But yeah, the Buddha did specifically use the words Vayodhatu, the wind in the stomach. But it doesn't really matter.
Bente, I have a question on the text. So it was mentioned the year 1324, and I don't quite understand. As I understood, that is 60 years ago.
Yes, about that.
But is it another calendar? Because nowadays we are in 2025.
It is another calendar. It's the Burmese calendar.
Ah.
Which is probably based on a king. I don't know the history of it.
Okay, see, and it was also mentioned that about the dating of the sutras, but is it important? Is it very important to know the dates of the sutras? As far as I know, they are not presented in I don't know, advanced successions as it was already mentioned. This first sutta was quite advanced. So the question
Quite sure
is,
what you're asking, yeah.
Is it important to have the certain sequence in which the Buddha taught the sutras?
No. I'm told that this year is 1387 in Myanmar.
Next question from the YouTube chat. How can I stay mindful while studying, since I often get stressed, struggle with self-doubt, and lose myself in my thoughts?
So, okay, important is not to attempt to stay mindful. You don't stay mindful, not until, well, I think it's always going to be it's a bad way of looking at it. Mindfulness is something you do. It's a momentary thing, something you do at every moment. Every moment you cultivate mindfulness. So rather than looking at it as something you maintain, because of course that would be something that is stable, and that's sort of contrary to the whole philosophy of the practice of mindfulness. You practice mindfulness to see that nothing is stable, and mindfulness starts to show you these things that you're seeing. Probably through your practice of mindfulness, it's helped to emphasize or to help you see more clearly that your mind is like this, that your mind gets stressed, that you struggle with, that you have these qualities inside. Because for many people, they don't even see these things. They don't notice them. They instead wield them like a cudgel to bash their enemies over the head with, or bash themselves over they wield the hindrances: greed, anger, doubt, worry, stress. Hold on to these, thinking I am stressed, I struggle with self-doubt. So these are the kinds of things you're doing most likely. I mean, it's not an indictment of you, but this is just the way it goes. You identify, you say these things are me and mine. So rather than think of mindfulness as something that you stay and thereby don't have any stress, don't doubt, don't lose yourself in your thoughts. You apply mindfulness every moment that you can, that you realize those things are happening. So every moment when you realize, oh, I have doubt, rather than wielding it, saying, this doubt, what am I going to do with this doubt? Take the doubt as an object. When you have stress, take the stress as an object. Don't expect it to go away. Don't expect it to be amenable to your wishes. Don't expect for mindfulness to somehow suddenly remove all of this chaos and bad habits in your mind. Mindfulness first and foremost shows you the good and bad qualities that exist in your mind, and it shows you the good and bad qualities of the objects of experience. In other words, helps you to see the nature of reality such that it's not worth getting upset about, getting stressed about, doubting about, and so on. Try and see mindfulness as something that you apply moment by moment, and learn to bear with the chaos, as opposed to hoping that it somehow disappears and you just have peace and calm all the time.
The next question is, when I focus on my breath and the rising of my abdomen, I often find myself trying to control my breathing to fit my noting, rather than letting the noting follow the breath. Is that a problem?
It is a problem, and it's one of the problems that we attempt to, one of the problems that make up the reason why we practice mindfulness. Our need to control is a reason to change, a reason to better ourselves so that we stop needing to control everything, needing to get our way, have things go our way all the time. So this is a really good example of how valuable focusing on the stomach is. I mean, it's just so practical and so immediate that any naysayer who says, oh, focusing on the stomach, that's not the Buddha's teaching, or I mean, not to pick on the person who asked that question, it's a common thing for people to say and to doubt about, but to be clear, regardless of whether you theoretically believe that this is something that the Buddha would teach or so on, as soon as you practice it, you can't help but see the three characteristics. You can't help but see the importance of seeing the three characteristics. You can't help but see the suffering and stress that comes from not seeing the three characteristics, for in this example, needing things to be under your control. Because the real problem with what you're describing is that it's impossible to maintain that. That it's stressful to try and maintain. That there's an amount of stress and suffering that comes from trying to do what you're describing. And this is showing you very clearly the problem that you have in your mind. It's a very big problem, the need to control everything, every little thing, including even the stomach rising. Why it's so practical and so valuable is because it's ridiculous. Why am I trying to control the movements of my stomach? It's because that's how we approach everything. That's how we approach life. Control, fix, maintain, constantly poking and prodding, forcing and trying to make ourselves into this ideal of who we want to be, and by extension everything around us, trying to make other people be what we want them to be. Our possessions, keep them the way we want them to be, make them the way we want to be, possessing and acquiring the things that will make us happy, none of which is sustainable or satisfying in any way. So what you're seeing is the problem with self, the problem with perceiving things as me and mine, and thereby trying to control them. So as you continue to practice, you'll start to change, because you'll see how stressful and unpleasant it is to need to control everything, including your stomach. And as a result, it will begin to change. So what you should see gradually through your practice is that eventually that changes. Eventually your mind starts to learn to experience without judging, without reacting, without forcing, without trying to control.
The next question is, would you say that the ripening of nibbida is one of the most profound developments on the path? It was transformative for me. It felt like I had finally seen the truth I had been studying for months.
The Buddha singled out nibbida as a turning point. Singled it out as the quality or the stage, I guess, on the path that is transformative. Or let's put it this way, as a good way of describing the path as a whole. He singled out nibbida as a good way of describing the path. It's because it's pivotal. It's not the consummation of the path. Someone who has gained nibbida, which for those of you who don't know, it means disenchantment. So this shift from being excited about things, seeking out that which will make you happy, or seeking out that which will fix and free you from your stresses and suffering to just getting tired of it all, losing interest in trying to fix things or make things the way you want them or so on, or find the things that you want, or find that which will somehow satisfy you. And so it's sort of the precursor to letting go. It's valuable, but it's not the consummation. Of course, the consummation is that as a result of nibbida, cultivates a desire to be free. The desire to be free leads to a appreciation of the way to be free, and appreciation of the nature of reality that allows you to finally let go. And it's letting go that is the consummation. But nibbida is certainly an important factor on the path.
The next question is, I am chronically stuck in hopelessness and have no mental will to do anything, and I am suffering mentally because of that. How can meditation, specifically noting, help?
It can help you to see it a little more clearly than how you're describing it. I mean, there are errors to some of your statements, which are normal and natural, but it's not quite how things are. So it will help you to break it apart into what's actually going on. And as a result of seeing what's actually going on, your mind changes. You stop hurting yourself in the ways that you're hurting yourself, because you see more clearly about what's actually going on. So first of all, hopelessness and having no mental will to do anything are probably not the true cause of suffering. True cause of suffering is something that you don't like, for the most part. Something's happening that you don't like. So if you don't like having no hope, for example, if you don't like having no mental will to do anything, or if you don't like the consequences of having no mental will to do anything, then it's that disliking that's causing you suffering. And it's not to say that you should have no mental ill will or you should be hopeless. But to be honest, hopelessness is a quality that the Buddha praised. Having no hope. The problem is that people want something to hope for. They want something to look forward to, right? They want some light at the end of the tunnel, which from a Buddhist perspective is living in the future. It's not valuable. It's a mistake. If you live in the future, then when the future comes, all you have is a habit of living in the future. So you're not present as a result of your habit of waiting for that present moment that's going to satisfy you, and so you're not satisfied by it. You're living in the future. You're accustomed to looking for something good in the future. No, it's just a bad habit. There's no value that comes from it. It doesn't lead to true happiness. Comes from finding peace here and now, no matter what the situation. So your situation could be dire from a worldly perspective. Maybe you have no money, maybe you're deeply in debt, maybe you have no job, maybe you have no food, maybe your health is bad, maybe you're dying. Any of these things can be true, and you can still be at peace if you learn how to be mindful, which means to face your experiences and to find peace and happiness now without needing hope, without really even needing will to do anything. You don't need will to do anything. Not everything we do comes from some grand desire for things to happen. We think that's the only thing, you have to have some ambition in order for yourself to even get out of bed. It's not really true. You can just get out of bed, Or you can get out of bed for many reasons, one of them being to practice mindfulness. But you don't have to get out of bed. You can also be mindful in bed. That's the beauty of it, is you can be mindful anywhere at any time, even if you're dying. So there's nothing that could stand in your way of it. And so as a result, it's so powerful and so valuable because it changes not your experiences, but your perspective on them. And that's valuable because, well, we can't expect our experiences to always be the way we want. But our perspective on them can eventually, through training and practice, be in a way that frees us from the stress and suffering in regards to them. Might be something you want to try. You can certainly give it a try. We have a booklet on how to meditate. I don't know if you've read it. That's a good place to start. And then we have an at-home course where you can practice completely free with a teacher, meet with a teacher once a week, and go through several months of daily practice that could quite likely give you great value if you give it a try.
The next question is from the Discord community. Is the experience of nibbida something like experiential awareness during meditation? Or is it something like gradually becoming less and less interested in worldly affairs due to mindfulness?
Right, sort of both. It's a jnana. It's one of the stages of knowledge. It's a change in one's perspective as a result of mindfulness. As a result of practicing mindfulness, you gradually lose interest. You come to a point where you're not even really interested in eating. You do eat because, well, you got to stay alive, but any craving for food or enjoyment of the sensual taste of food or anything like that, you just lose interest in it. It can sound horrible, pretty bad, It's like, what would it be like to just be so devoid of any pleasure, It just seems horrific to people who are stuck in pleasure, but it is so incredibly liberating. It feels like the veil has been lifted, and it feels fresh and free, while at the same time completely dull and uninspired. Everything around you looks dull and uninspired because it is. And that's the point of all of this is that no longer is a factor in your happiness. Because you see that, you stop thinking something will make me happy. It's not looking at something and saying, oh, that's dull and uninspiring. Oh, that's dull and uninspiring. It's the realization that that it's impossible for something to be inspiring, to be exciting, to be satisfying. It's impossible for anything, because that's the nature of reality. And so you gain peace and happiness as a result of stopping the search for peace and happiness in those things. You stop wasting your time and effort on things that can't satisfy you. It's happy. This isn't a dull and uninspiring knowledge. This is incredibly inspiring to become uninspired, become disenchanted. People talk about these knowledges sometimes as if they are unpleasant, and they really aren't. When you realize them, they are liberating. They are truly inspiring, sort of.
The next question is, in today's reading, one line is, to go in search of that which is not subjected to old age, disease, and death, constitutes a noble quest. Did his past good karma give the Bodhisattva the brilliance to think something that deathless can even exist and hence worth striving for?
That's fair. Yeah. I don't think they quite put it as karma. I mean, that's one way of describing it, but they use the word parami. So it's not just karma, it's the quality is based on the Buddha's karma, let's say. But he had these perfections. He was fully developed. It allowed him to, of his own accord, see the path and the need for the path without any instruction. Most of us have previous instruction. If not in this life, then in past lives. We've probably met with Buddhists in the past and so on. The Bodhisattva also admit. The Buddha was able to, in this life, find the path for himself as a result of his perfections. No, I guess what I would say is many of us have these sorts of ideas based on sometimes on past lives, based on the qualities that we've cultivated in past lives. So I wouldn't say this sort of idea was unique to the Buddha, or the Bodhisattva, sorry. But what was unique was his ability to then find the solution. Find the thing that is not subject to old age. So yeah, actually, you might be right. I mean, it's not so much, doesn't so much require the perfections of a Buddha to have this sort of thought. I mean, he's trying to. This seems very much like trying to make something relatable. He's giving his audience something that they can relate to. They can say, yeah, I've felt that sort of way, or that makes sense. That's reasonable because I've also felt that things are subject to old age, sickness, and death, and maybe I should find something that isn't. He's not telling them anything that's terribly innovative here. It's profound and it's valuable. So the idea here is to direct the audience in the right direction. They should be able to agree with this, and it will make them start to think, yeah, that's true. I should as well seek for that which is not subject. So he's framing things in this way, that he's framing our experience as humans, that we search for things that cannot satisfy us, and instead we should search for that which is truly going to lead to peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering.
There's another practice question. Sometimes, when my abdomen rises and falls very quickly, and I can't keep up with the noting, what can I do to help with this?
You can just note rise, fall, rise, fall. Note more quickly. Fine. Just also be clear that the rising and falling isn't the only thing to pay attention to. So you want to pay attention to other things that might be happening. Sometimes there are other reasons why the stomach is rising and falling so quickly. Doesn't necessarily have to be, just to point out that there may be. And if there is, make sure you're not ignoring something like an emotion or something like that. Pain can be, calm feeling can be, anything like that. You don't have to go looking for a cause. It just means that if there is something else, make sure you're noting other things as well.
The next question is, Bhante, I have noticed since I started following Buddha's teaching, a lot of things in the world have lost their influence and meaning to me. It should have made me lighter, but I feel irritated. Any advice?
Well, those things are not necessarily what's the word? I mean, they're related, but they're not telling the whole story, let's put it that way. You get irritated because you expect things to be a different way, or you want things to be a different way, or you want things not to be the way they are. So simply losing interest in the world isn't the cause of your irritation, let's put it that way. There's something else there going on. But they can be very much related. It's just that this is because of your need for things to be meaningful, inspiring, influential, that need makes us irritated when they're not. It can even lead us to not be interested in meditation, not want to practice, want to give up the practice. There can also be fear, but these are not based on seeing the truth, which is that the world is not meaningful. There's nothing in the world that's really truly meaningful or exciting or so on. But they're from the fact that we expect things to be that way. So this is just really just you seeing how your mind works, how your mind functions. It looks for something that brings it pleasure, and when it doesn't get it, irritation. Quite simple. It's the only reason why irritation could arise, because you don't get what you want, or you get something you don't want. That's it. So that's a problem. It's a problem with how your mind works. It's a problem with how our minds work. That we get upset about things. Losing interest is the kind of thing that over time helps free you from that. But in the meantime, you're not just losing interest, you're also seeing how interested you are. Because you wouldn't get angry if you weren't interested. You only get angry if you're interested. So what the solution, of course, is to face the anger, to face the things that make you angry, and to see them more clearly, so that slowly you lose interest in getting angry. So there's more going on. It's not these two things are the only things that exist in your mind. I'm losing interest and I'm irritated, so they must be connected. There's more there. You're losing interest, sure, that's great, but you're also still very interested, else you wouldn't get angry, right? That's the point. So pay more attention to the anger, to the things that make you angry, and you'll start to really and truly lose interest in getting angry, lose interest in getting greedy. You'll lose interest in anything. You won't need interest. You'll just be happy, peaceful, free. Wanting to feel lighter is another issue. It can lead to irritation. Why am I not feeling lighter? Because you have expectations about feeling lighter. Don't have such expectations, or just note when you do have such expectations, wanting and so on.
The next question is, I went to Sri Lanka to ordain. The abbot said I was not ready. I felt discouraged and felt that something is wrong with me. I asked him and he didn't say why. Can you tell me from your experience when one is ready to ordain?
Well, on the one hand, ordination should be a first step, not a last step. So you shouldn't have to be ready to ordain. You should ordain when you are ready to ordain it. But You should ordain when you're ready, but what I mean by that is when you say, I want to ordain. That's what it means to be ready, on the one hand. On the other hand, what we have in modern times, and also in the time of the Buddha, was and is problem monks. People who aren't capable of living the monastic life and yet stay as monastics. There's a big thing in Thailand recently. I don't want to go into too much detail about it. You can learn about it yourself if you're interested, which you probably shouldn't be. But a lot of high-ranking monks were forcibly disrobed. Big thing. The monks who had been monks for many, many years and who'd risen to great ranks turned out were not really monks anymore at all. So a lot of people are cautious against ordaining. A lot of good monks are cautious against ordaining just anyone. So we try to make some sort of middle ground. We don't want to make it overly prohibitive. Some places will allow you to ordain temporarily, and if you want to stay on longer, you need permission from the head monk. That's what they do in Thailand and some places. In Sri Lanka, they tend to force you to ordain as a novice first. So I think the problem is that over time, becoming a novice has come to mean almost as much as being a monk. It's come to the point where people aren't really paying attention to whether someone is a monk or a novice. They don't really care. And novices are acting as monks. And why that's a bit of a problem is because, well, it's not that big of a problem. But it can be a problem because then novices are given too much esteem, and therefore can cause problems when people follow them. People who don't realize, oh, this isn't actually a monk, this is just a novice monk who only has 10 precepts. And so that novice monk might lead them astray because they have such great faith in monks in general. They think, oh, this is a monk, he must know what he's talking about, but actually he's just a 10 precept novice. Now, that being said, ideally a novice is something novitiacy is something you can do for a period of time. And so in Sri Lanka, they'll make you become a novice for a year or 2 years even before they let you fully ordain. And I think that's one way of doing it. I think that's how we're leaning in these times. So we don't have such a big deal with ordaining people as a novice, though, as I said, it still is a problem because once they're ordained as a novice, they might not feel the need to ordain as a monk, and they might cause lots of problems. So usually on top of making you become a novice, we also make you stay as a layperson for some time. And again, there should be some sort of middle ground where you don't make it overly prohibitive or turning people away. My take has been for a long time to not talk about ordination. Not talk about ordination to anyone who hasn't come to do meditation practice at our center. The problem is people come to us looking to ordain without any real interest in practicing what we teach. And that's the biggest problem we've had again and again, where people are not really interested in the practice, but they have their own ideas about what it means to ordain and their own ideas of the Buddha's teaching, sometimes not even in line with the Theravada, let alone the Mahasi Sayadaw tradition, and they cause problems. So we don't talk about ordination. Here I am talking about ordination, but we don't discuss it with people who have questions. Can I ordain with you? This sort of thing. Our policy that I've asked our organization to adopt is to tell people we don't talk about we don't discuss ordination with people who haven't done courses in our tradition. And to leave it there. I'm not going to tell you that we will ordain you or that it's possible. I'm just not going to discuss it. If you're coming here for that reason, you should go somewhere else. When you come to us, you're coming to us to practice meditation. End of story.
Bhante, we've hit the hour. Do you have time for another question? It's a bit longer.
Sure.
From the Discord community.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I am experiencing increased disenchantment because of seeing the three characteristics over and over again. On one hand, I feel contentment and peace increasing. On the other hand, I experience restlessness and some fear because of the backlash I am experiencing in my relationships, especially from misunderstandings, i.e., people are non-responsive or angry towards me. I am reluctant to practice meditation for fear of what can happen next. For example, fear that I might slow down the progress on the path. The most scary part is my relationships with my teen children. They are uninterested because they compare me to how I was before and they compare me to their surroundings. Can you help me see more clearly on this, Bhante? Thank you.
So again, it's not, I mean, it's pretty clear, but I would say there is some other factor there. It's still falling into the problem of missing the connection. The connection is not I experience restlessness and fear because of the backlash. That's pretty clear and obviously true, but there is still an intermediary stage. It's not because of anything that you experience externally. Things externally cannot make us feel fear or restlessness. It's our expectation of things being different than what they are. Our hope that things will be a certain way or our hope that things will not be a certain way, and our disappointment when they are the way that we don't want them to be or aren't the way that we want them to be, and that sort of thing, as the Buddha talked about in the First Noble Truth. So that's where you really have to, you need a broader perspective rather than seeing it in such black and white terms as I have to choose between with the world or the meditation. Try and understand that whether people treat you in a good way or treat you in a bad way is really trivial and irrelevant in the broader scheme of things. You're all going to die. In 100 years, everyone you know, everyone here will be dead. We won't know each other. We'll forget each other. We won't remember that even this conversation happened. This is all going to be completely erased. In not a very long time, blink of the eye in the face of samsara. So it's all pretty trivial. I mean, that's not the answer just to philosophize in that way, but that's the truth. And it's a broader perspective that can help, just even intellectually, to help you see this missing link that you're not mentioning here, though probably are generally aware of, is that there is an expectation of things to be a different way. And you have to be able to pull out of that, pull out of the idea of having children. You don't have children, it's just a concept. These are people, beings, who have their own path and who you have strong emotions towards and who have strong emotions towards you because of your emotional relationship. But those emotions are also meaningless and not very helpful. They don't actually bring true satisfaction or peace. I mean, it's not to demonize or to chastise for having them. It's just that eventually you gain nibbida, you lose interest. I remember I had one woman who came to me once, a Thai woman, who came to me once about her son. This was a common thing when I was deeply teaching Thai people. They would come to me about their children, wanting me to help their children. She didn't phrase it that way. She said she wanted advice on how to help her son, who was, what she felt, in a bad way, who had a teacher, not a Buddhist teacher, but had a teacher who was teaching him things that were not very good. And so I said, I know what will help you. Come and meditate. And it wasn't what she was looking for at all. She wanted advice, or she wanted some way to help her son. And I said, you come and meditate. This is what will help. And she came and she did 1 course, 2 courses. And after like the 2nd course, she came back and I said, how are you? She said, good. How's your son? She said, oh, I don't know, whatever he's doing. He's just doing his own thing. She had completely changed from being worried and stressed about the way their son was going to just realizing that he wasn't under her control. He was an adult by then. He wasn't a child. So he was in his 20s or 30s. I never met him, but she described her son. And she was able to let go to that extent. So that's where you have to get to, where you don't have expectations about. I mean, it's not sound dire, but certainly you need to be able to see the broader picture, that it doesn't really matter how people treat you. It doesn't have any real meaning. It's all going to be over. In 100 years, it'll all be over for sure. I just heard about someone recently who lived to be 111 here in Sri Lanka. Born in India, Tamil. Came over here when she was young, I guess. Just passed away recently at 111. That's pretty incredible. Still very brief. More important is the emotions that you're feeling. And you shouldn't try to ground them or anchor them in any kind of, these are from this, these are because of this, and that, therefore that this is a problem. The emotions that are, of course, the problem, and you have to face them and let them go. All right, that's all for this week. Thank you all for coming. I always appreciate the questions. It's, I think, a great way to have direct influence and give something directly to the community. So I'm always happy. It's an honor to be able to answer people's questions in the Dhamma. It's a great punya for me that I have this opportunity to help someone directly. So I'm always happy to answer questions. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate the interest in the Buddha's teaching, that we're able to study the Buddha's teaching together. I hope that continues. You're all welcome back, and I hope no one feels disinclined to return, but you're always welcome to come and go. I appreciate everyone who takes up the practice of Buddhist teaching and gains insight and understanding. I appreciate most of all those people who dedicate themselves to the practice to the extent that they're able to see the truth for themselves and become free from suffering. So, thank you all for coming. Have a good week. Sadhu.
Thank you, Bhante. We are deeply grateful for you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.